From the poorest family, sleeping 15 deep on a clay stove because the floor will kill them by morning, to the prince, whose servants keep 4 fires burning in rooms he isn't even in. This is how a city survived 40 below. Nobody in 1300 owns a thermometer. But we know from tree rings, ice cores, and chronicle records that the winters of this period got savage, and in the Russian north, the coldest nights still hit 40 below today. So picture the city that has to handle it, Novgorod. Not a village, a major European trading city of tens of thousands, sitting on the Volkhov River and built almost entirely out of wood. We know it in extraordinary detail because the ground there did something strange. The soil is waterlogged clay that keeps oxygen out so the medieval city didn't rot. It's buried under up to 8 meters of it, and everything organic survived. House walls, timber streets, leather shoes, textiles, toys, food remains. Over 60 years of excavation has produced around 150,000 individual finds. And still, less than 3% of the medieval city has been dug. Now the physics. At -40, exposed skin freezes in around 10 minutes. Breathing that air pulls heat straight out of your core with every inhale. An unheated wooden house doesn't shelter you. It just slows the rate at which you die. And here's the part people miss. Cold at this level isn't an event, it's a season. This isn't a bad night. It's 5 months. 5 months in which nothing grows, no ground can be dug, no water runs, and every single calorie of heat has to be manufactured on purpose, which is why almost everything in this city is built around one job. Start with the building, because a northern house isn't designed to look like a house. It's designed like a thermos. It's a log cabin, pine, larch, or spruce, laid horizontally, notched at the corners so the logs lock and the joints tighten as the wood settles. Gaps get caulked with moss. No mortar, no plaster, no glass. Log walls have real thermal mass and, critically, no draft paths between courses, which is exactly what stone construction can't manage. It sits low. The windows are tiny, sometimes just slits with a stretched membrane or a shutter, because every window is a hole in your survival. The door is small and often faces away from the wind. Many houses put an unheated entry chamber in front of the living room, a cold porch that acts as an airlock, so the heat isn't sucked out every time somebody comes in. Inside, the whole room is organized around one object, the stove. Not a fireplace against a wall, a large clay or stone mass built into the room, which absorbs heat while it burns and then radiates it for hours after the fire is dead. And in the northern houses, it has no chimney. That sounds insane until you understand why. A chimney is a hole that takes your heat outside. A chimneyless stove, a black stove, dumps the smoke into the room, where it rises and pools under a high ceiling built specifically to hold it, then leaks out through a vent or the door. You live under the smoke layer. It blackens everything. It wrecks your lungs, and it is dramatically more fuel efficient than a chimney. In a climate that will kill you, efficiency beats comfort every time. The family sleeps on and around that stove. Sleeping platforms get built between the stove and the wall, often in 2 levels, so the warmest place in the house holds the most bodies. Children and the elderly get the top, and the animals often come inside, too. A byre built onto the same structure, or a partition at the end of the room. It smells appalling. It also works because a cow generates real heat, and an animal that freezes to death outside is a family that starves in April. But every single thing in that room, the stove, the sleeping platform, the survival of everyone under the roof, depends on one supply. And in January, it is the most valuable commodity in this city. Not food, not silver. People steal it, fight over it, and die getting it. I'll tell you what it is shortly. Before the house, though, there's a smaller shelter: what you're wearing. And medieval cold-weather clothing is far more sophisticated than people assume. The principle is layering and trapped air: a linen shirt against the skin, wool over it, and then more wool, because wool keeps insulating even when it's damp, which is the whole reason it dominates northern dress for 1,000 years. Over that goes the outer layer, and this is where the north diverges hard from the rest of Europe. Sheepskin coats worn fleece inwards. Furs, not decoration, structure. Felt, which is wool compressed into a dense windproof mat and is one of the best cold-weather materials ever invented. Mittens rather than gloves, because separated fingers lose heat far faster than fingers sharing a compartment. Feet are the real battleground. Novgorod's waterlogged soil has coughed up leather footwear by the thousand, and the poorest people wore shoes woven from bark, packed with straw and worn over thick cloth foot wraps. The wrap matters more than the shoe. It's replaceable, it can be dried at the stove overnight, and a dry foot at -40 is the difference between walking and losing toes. Head and neck get covered without exception because you dump enormous heat through an uncovered head, and a fur-lined cap with ear flaps is not a costume choice. It's equipment. One more thing, and it's the detail that shows how much they understood. You do not want to sweat. Sweat soaks your inner layers, and wet insulation stops insulating and starts stealing heat from you instead. So people working outdoors strip layers before they start hauling and put them back on the moment they stop. That is exactly the rule modern cold-weather guidance still teaches, arrived at 600 years early by people who simply watched what happened to anyone who got it wrong. And here's the class marker hidden in all of it. Everyone in this city is wearing layers. What changes as you go up is the outer layer, and in the north, that means fur. Which brings us to the strangest fact about this whole city. Novgorod's entire economy ran on fur. Its traders pushed north and east into the forests to take squirrel, marten, sable, beaver, and fox by the boatload, and then sold them west to the Hanseatic merchants who had a permanent trading post in the city. Northern Europe's aristocracy was lined, trimmed, and hooded in pelts that came through here. And it went further than trade. In the birchbark letters, over 1,000 everyday documents scratched into bark, and preserved in that same wet clay. Furs are counted in a unit called the sorachok, a bundle of 40 skins. And in several 11th and 12th century letters, the word for squirrel fur is used to mean simply money. Sit with that. In one of the coldest major cities in medieval Europe, the currency was warmth. You could settle a debt in the ability not to freeze, and it explains something about the city's whole shape. Novgorod is rich because it is cold, because it sits at the edge of the forest that produces the one thing warm countries cannot make for themselves. The climate that makes life here brutal is the same climate that pays for the city, which also tells you exactly how the class system worked here. A poor family owns sheepskin, the animal they raised. A merchant owns squirrel and marten. A boyar or a prince owns sable and wears it where people can see it. The gap between rich and poor in this city isn't measured in what's on the plate, it's measured in what's on the back. So here's that commodity, the most valuable thing in this city in January. Firewood. Do the arithmetic. A stove burning through a northern winter eats a genuinely enormous volume of timber, several cubic meters of it per household per season. Multiply that by a city of tens of thousands, and you're consuming forest at industrial scale every single year, forever. But volume isn't the hard part. Timing is. Wood cut in autumn is wet, and wet wood at -40 is nearly useless. It burns cold, chokes with smoke, and gives you a fraction of the heat. Fuel has to be cut and stacked months early in summer when nobody feels cold and nobody wants to do it. Every household in this city is being asked to do hard physical labor in July for a problem that arrives in January. And by midwinter, hauling it becomes the job. The nearby wood is gone, so fuel comes from further out, dragged in on sledges over frozen ground, which is the one genuine gift of the cold, because frozen rivers and frozen marsh become roads. Terrain that's impassable bog in summer carries loaded sledges in February. In the north, winter isn't when travel stops. It's when heavy transport finally becomes possible. There's a second fuel problem nobody thinks about: light. At this latitude, midwinter days are short and gloomy, and you cannot open a window for it. So the same fire is also the lamp, which is another reason the household clusters around one point in one room for months. Whatever else is happening in that house, it is happening within about 3 meters of the stove. That's why the woodpile beside a northern house is a status object. It's visible, it's countable, and everyone walking past can read exactly how likely your family is to make it to spring. The poor family burns whatever it can get: brushwood, dung, offcuts, and rations heat, letting the stove go cold in the day and firing at once. The wealthy household burns seasoned hardwood and keeps its rooms warm around the clock. That single difference is the sharpest class line in the entire city, and it's invisible in any painting. And there's a cost to all of this that nobody in the city talks about, because the cold is not actually what killed most people here. Something else destroyed this place again and again, in the depths of winter, with every well and every river frozen solid, and every household you've just met was helping it happen. That's where this video ends. Staying warm from the inside is a real, physical requirement, not a figure of speech. Your body is a furnace, and in this climate it's running flat out. So the diet goes heavy. Grain porridges, dense rye bread, and above all, fat. Fat carries more than twice the energy of the same weight in grain, which is why northern cooking loads butter, lard, and fatty fish into everything. Cabbage, fermented into sauerkraut in barrels, supplies vitamin C right through a season with no fresh produce, which quietly prevents scurvy without anyone knowing the word. And meals are hot on purpose. Soup and porridge aren't just calories, they're heat delivered internally, which is why the stove and the cooking are the same object. Then there's preservation, and here the cold flips from enemy to tool. Down in England, you'd be burning through expensive salt to keep meat through winter. Up here, from November to March, the whole city is a freezer. You butcher, you put the meat outside, and it stays frozen solid for 4 months. Fish are frozen in stacks. Even milk gets frozen into discs and chipped off as needed. The climate that's trying to kill you is also doing your food storage for free. Now the drink and the myth that needs killing. Alcohol does not warm you. It opens the blood vessels near your skin, which feels like a rush of heat and is in fact your core temperature dropping faster. At 40 below, a drunk man outdoors is a dead man. What people actually drink is hot, honey-based drinks, herbal infusions, weak fermented grain drinks, all served steaming. And no, there's no vodka here. Distilled spirits don't reach this part of the world until the 15th century at the earliest. And there's one more piece of heating technology, and it's a building of its own: the bathhouse. The banya, a small detached log hut with a stove of heaped stones, heated until it's ferocious, then the fire raked out and the smoke cleared before anyone goes in. It's described in the primary chronicle, where a visitor watches people steam themselves, beat themselves with bundles of twigs, and then throw cold water over the lot, and concludes they are voluntarily torturing themselves. He'd missed the point. In a world where your house is smoke-blackened and you're wearing the same wool for weeks, the banya is hygiene, medicine, social life, and a full-body reheat, all in one building. Villages that had almost nothing had one of these. We cover stories like this every week. If you want to keep going deeper, subscribe. Now go up the ladder, and something counterintuitive happens. Stone is a worse material for this than wood. It has huge thermal mass, which sounds good until you realize that means it takes days to warm and stays cold for weeks, and it wicks damp straight through. A stone hall with a big open fireplace radiates heat in one direction and sends most of it up the flue. Stand 3 meters away and you're cold. So the rich fight back with layers, exactly like the poor do, just at building scale. Wooden paneling and thick textiles hung on the walls, which is what tapestries are actually for. Heavy curtains and bed hangings, turning a bed into a small insulated tent. Rushes and furs on the floor, small private chambers heated separately because a great hall is unheatable and everyone knows it. But the prince's real advantages are simpler and less glamorous. He can buy unlimited fuel and staff to carry it. He has servants keeping fires lit in rooms before he walks into them. He wears sable while his plowmen wear sheepskin. And if his residence is unbearable, he moves to another one. That's the honest difference. Nobody in this century has central heating. The rich are not warm in the way you are warm. They're cold less often in smaller rooms, wearing better animals. What money buys at 40 below isn't comfort, it's margin, which leaves the thing I said would end this video. What destroyed this city over and over, what every household was helping, and what nobody could stop in midwinter: fire. Look at what we've built. A city made almost entirely of wood. Timber-paved streets. One excavated stretch runs nearly a kilometer down to the river. Houses packed tight against each other for shelter from the wind. Roofs of shingle and thatch. Every single building stuffed with dry, seasoned fuel and containing a live fire that must never be allowed to go out. Now freeze the river, freeze the wells, and take away every source of water in the city. Medieval Novgorod burned repeatedly. The layers archaeologists dig through are defined partly by fire horizons. The city is literally stratified by the times it went up. Its first cathedral, built of wood, burned. Churches burn, get rebuilt, and burn again. Historians estimate the enormous majority of the city's written records were destroyed by fire, and that perhaps 20,000 more birch bark documents are still down there in the clay. That's the trade the whole city is making. Every household must run an open fire for 5 months to survive the cold, and the collective result is that the thing keeping everyone alive periodically destroys everything they own. So the real answer to how a medieval city survives 40 below is not one clever invention. It's that the entire settlement is reorganized around heat. The walls, the windows, the roof, the clothes, the food, the calendar, the currency, and the risk everyone silently agrees to run. The poorest family manages it with a stove, a sheepskin, and a woodpile they cut in July. The prince manages it with sable and staff. Neither of them is warm the way you are right now, and both of them go to sleep knowing that the one thing standing between them and the cold is also the one thing that can take the whole city with it. More like this every week. Subscribe.